Welcome to the Bold Goal Crusher podcast. For anyone looking to stop letting life get in the way and start crushing bold goals. I'm your host, Sara Mayer, and I'm thrilled to navigate this journey with you because it's time to start boldly achieving without working double time. So let's dive in. Hello, Bold Goal Crushers. I'm super excited to introduce you to my guest today and my friend. Amy is the founder and chief evolution officer of Painted Porch Strategies, a stoically based training and advisory team dedicated to the principle that there is untapped potential and opportunity in each of you, leaders, learners, and teams, to create meaningful change in your life and work with authenticity, resilience, and purpose. With over 18 years of experience working in and alongside teams embarking on change, Amy and her amazing team offer training programs, coaching, and support centered on the three core fundamentals that can make change stick: emotional intelligence, communication, and collaboration. With guidance from the Painted Porch, you can become a transformational, change-ready leader, adept at navigating challenges and opportunities, and inspiring others to do the same so that you can thrive and grow in life, at work, and anywhere in between. Amy, I'm so excited to have you on the show today.
Thank you so much for having me, Sarah. I am thrilled to be here and talking to you and all of your Bold Goal Crusher listeners as well.
Oh, thank you. It's so good to have you on the show. Just for our listeners, Amy and I have been friends. We're in a mutual group together. They're like two groups. That's another story, but two groups together. And I had the opportunity to hear Amy speak at an event. And you know how you have these people in your life and you don't really know what they do. They're awesome. And I heard Amy speak and I was like, oh, I need to have Amy on the show. She did so good.
Thank you.
Yeah, she definitely crushed it. And so, Amy, I know that you really focus on change and you talk a lot about change. And for some people listening, they may be hearing the word change and maybe even thinking about hitting next episode because change makes people uncomfortable, right?
Mhm. Change can be hard. In fact, I had an executive say to me one time recently, change sucks, and so do people on occasion.
Yeah.
And it is true. Change is something that we go through every single day in big and small ways, but it's the bigger ones that we often tend to get a little tripped up on. We either get in our own way, or sometimes if we're working in a large group, we can have other people who might be making it a little bit more difficult to move change forward.
Yeah. And many corporations, businesses, even people go through change. And many times they're like, yes, I can't wait for a change. I'm going to move to the beach or I'm going to do something different. And those tend to go a little more smoothly. But then there's the change that is unplanned or unexpected or unwanted. So, can you talk a little bit about the different types of change and how we might react to that?
Yeah, absolutely. So you're exactly right. There's things that we can do really quickly. We can pivot on the fly. Things like if we get stuck in traffic or we have a flight delay. Since I was just recently traveling, and I know you do a lot of traveling, that happens. And we can usually just roll with it. We can
Yeah.
adapt really quickly to that when we're presented with those moments. But when we try to embark on some sort of intentional change, something, say, a big goal that we've set for ourselves and we're trying to achieve it. Those big, hairy ass goals that occasionally we want to pursue, or even sometimes the smaller ones. We often, as I credit myself as being on occasion, we often overthink it. We bring a lot of our past experiences as it relates to change into the present. And sometimes we unintentionally hijack it because of a various degree of reasons. That could probably be a whole other series of conversations we could have about the deeper why behind we struggle with change. But the truth is that we do, even if we really want it, even if it's something that in our heart of hearts, in our deepest parts of us, we know that this is a change that we want to make, we still struggle with it.
Yeah. And are there ways that we might prepare for those types of things, or I'm sure you have some tips to help us get through that, but I know I've had that happen where I'm like, "Oh, I wasn't expecting this change. I really liked what I was doing at work."
Hmm. Yeah. So I would say, first and foremost, get really clear about why it is you're embarking on that change. I know you talk about that a lot when it comes to the goals that you're setting. Is there are the usual things that you want to make sure that you do connect with the deeper why, have the clear incentives. There are those pieces of it. But also, I like to take, because I think, as you heard in my speech, I said I'm actually a goal setting flunky, or at least I used to be.
Yeah.
I would credit myself as not being really great at them. I would lose interest. I would forget about them. They would, 3 weeks, a month later, they would just get on the shelf and I'd be like, oh, whoops. Oh, and it wasn't necessarily because I wasn't interested in it. I wasn't passionate about it. It wasn't something that I wanted to do. It was just the way I approached it. I looked at it, I think, too big.
Mm.
And often, at least for me, the way I found that I've been able to make more meaningful change is to really break it up into sometimes what even might seem like the most trite of teeny tiny habits that I can start to develop to help me move that change forward. So I would say, first off, with anything that you're going on, with any change that you're embarking on, whether planned or unplanned, whether by push or by progress, whatever that reason is, I would say get really clear on what it means to you and what the impact is, and try to break down that change or how you approach that change in small ways.
Yeah. Now, some people seem to love change. Are there different ways that people like, let's be real, I've had a boss who, like, every day was changing something. But are there people who thrive on change? Do people respond differently to change?
Oh yes, there are different what's referred to as styles, or really style preferences when it comes to change. Now, when each of us possess all of these different styles, and I'll talk about each of them in a moment, but we tend to have one that we really lean into, or that shows up, what I like to say, when the shift hits the fan. When all is
Mhm.
said and done, when that change is being presented to you, there is one that tends to show up the most. And there's really three common styles that show up. There are the people, like a previous boss of yours, who loves change, who loves to constantly challenge the status quo, continually asking why. They have mastered their 4-year-old selves, and they are just constantly looking
Mm,
for ways to make change happen. They are the visionaries, the moonshots, the innovators, right? Those
mm,
people are what we refer to as originators. They love change and they love big picture change. They love change that is fundamentally different and looks
mm.
different than what people are doing today or how they're doing it.
And
On the com-
newsflash, I think I'm one of those.
yeah, yeah. If I took, there is an assessment that you could take to like home in on which one you typically are, but yeah, I'm a little bit higher on that spectrum, but I'm not all the way to the end.
Mhm.
On the flip side, on the complete opposite side, there are those individuals who, at least at face value, appear, I'll say, change hesitant.
Mm,
And often when we look at these people, we think that they're just being difficult. They're the people that don't like change, right? They're the ones that are oftentimes appear to be slowing it down, or being resistors, or they're late adopters. They are people that are like, I like what I'm doing today. And while part of that is true, these people that are conservers, these individuals, they like to keep things as they are. That doesn't actually mean that they are change resistant. They just need a lot more information, a lot more understanding to be able to feel comfortable with the change itself. But once they get there, man, they can be some of your greatest change ambassadors and change navigators on any journey that you're going through, and especially if you're on a team. But they just need a little bit more handholding, a little bit more
yeah.
time to feel assured, because they like change that is in small bits. It's incremental. It doesn't completely upset the apple cart. It's not rewriting everything that you do today. It's taking it in small bits or where it makes sense. And then there's people in the middle. There's the pragmatists. That's where I am. I'm a pragmatic originator. I'm like, yes, moonshot. Let's do it. Let's come up with something completely new, but if it makes sense. Let's
Yeah.
weigh the pros and the cons of making that change. They're the people that are probably going to be your best project managers if you were part of a change initiative, because they're going to listen to both sides, both the originators, the people who are like, let's do it, And the people are like, hold the phone. I need to take this a little bit more pace. So they're the individuals that are like, is the juice worth the squeeze? Let's be practical about this and pragmatic with how we approach this change, not just change for change's sake and not just staying the same because it feels safe.
Yeah. And I think you bring up a great point. A lot of times people who love change, they're changing everything just to change everything. And sometimes that change doesn't work or those things don't work. And so because of that, then the people on the other side are like, oh, see, I told you. I had an employee one time who was like, I'm just waiting the leadership out. And I was like, what does that mean? And she's like, I've been here 20 years. So the new people come in, I wait them out. If they stay for a year and a half, then I'll get on board. If they're not here for a year and a half, she's like, any change they make isn't going to stick. So she just would hang out,
Mm-hmm.
just
Yeah,
wait it out.
and in that regard, she is very much probably more of a conserver if we were going
Yeah.
to give her a little bit of an assessment there. But again, that doesn't mean that she's saying no.
Yeah.
She's just saying, I'm not yet convinced.
Yeah.
I'm not, you haven't proven to me that this change is necessary, relevant. It's going to move us forward. It's going to help us get to whatever that
Yeah.
next level, whatever the purpose or driver behind that change is. They're just like, I'll wait and see. But I imagine with her, if they stuck around for a year and a half,
Oh,
she's like,
she's all
okay.
in. Yeah.
She's like, all right, cool. I'm with you. And she might even be the one that's telling other people, no, you got to listen to so and so. What they're
Yeah.
doing is a really great idea. But again, it takes that time. You have to convince them. And especially when you think about how you communicate with those different individuals within a team or within a group, whether it's your family team, your work team, a volunteer team, nonprofit team, right? Which you do a lot of. It's understanding those different styles because not everybody hears and needs to receive the same information when it comes to change. Our originators are just like, die. It's going to be amazing. It's going to completely disrupt everything that we do. It's going to be like gangbusters. And those people on their side are like, no.
Yeah. And sometimes we don't always have all the information. So I'll share a little story about one time I took on a job, and I think I've told this in a shorter version, but I took on a job and they told me it was 4 days before the event started. It was a huge event. And my boss said, your only job is to sit here and watch. And so I took 6 pages of notes. And because I was new, things that were maybe broken or gave me pause were glaring. And I was still looking around. Does nobody see that this is not the most efficient thing? And I just happened to end up at a cocktail table with the vice president of IT. And I was like, so what do you do? How long have you been here? And I was like, do you think this process is efficient? And he said, I've been here 15 years waiting for somebody to ask me to create a program to get rid of what just happened. And I was like,
Mhm.
really? And it took 6 months for us to build it. Actually, I'll take that back. It took 2 months for us to build it. It took 6 months for us to convince everybody that we needed to build it.
Mhm.
And once it was built, it became like, why didn't we think of this before? Why have we been doing this for all these years and wasting everybody's time? But it really was the outside perspective of being able to see it from a different thing and then having somebody that could see the possibility.
Yeah.
And we had a Carol, her name actually was Carol, we've become friends since, but she was like, "I don't know how this is even possible, and I'm the biggest naysayer to this." And I wanted her on my team so bad. I got to pick my own team, and some of the teammates were like, "Why do you want Carol? She's gonna slow us down." And I was like, 1, because Carol's in a very critical role, and 2, she's gonna tell us all the things we need to address because she really was in the details of, "Okay, have you thought about this, and have you thought about that?" And she wasn't doing it in a way where it was like, totally against the change, back to your
Yeah.
point. She was like, "We're gonna need to address all these things or it's not going to work, and I don't really wanna be a part of something and spend a lot of time on it just to have it fail. So let's address these things." And so that was really cool, a cool part of having her on the team.
Yeah. And you touched on such an important piece when you think about change, especially change within a group that you're trying to embark on. Often when you think about who you want to choose to be on your team, you look for the people who are going to be your early cheerleaders.
Yeah.
So you tend to lean towards selecting individuals who have more of an originator personality to begin with. And while it's good to have that, you really need a mix of all three. You need all three on your team for that very reason. Number one, she's in an influential role, right? We're all
Yeah.
influencers. We may not all be leaders officially, but we are all influencers in some way, shape, or form. So she was a key influencer, both with her role and her reputation. And having her on your team will guarantee or at least get you in a better place to ensure that you have larger, broader adoption and understanding and engagement with the change that you're moving through, as opposed to just picking all the people that are like, yeah, do this. You
Yeah.
want to make sure you have that balance.
And she actually ended up being our biggest cheerleader.
Yeah.
And because she was like, "Oh, I was totally against this. They addressed these concerns, they addressed these concerns, and now I'm proud to be a part of this team." And that was a tipping point for the group.
Mhm.
And it did take us a little longer, like, to actually get it off the ground, but I think it was a better product because of that.
Yeah, and I think that's so key because I'm in the change readiness business. People always say, "Oh, change management." I'm like a little bit of that, but it's really the change readiness. It's what I like to call phase zero.
Yeah,
When people are approaching change, especially in their professional lives, what tends to happen, and I see it happen over and over, is yeah, the change readiness thing. Yeah, we know that's important. We'll get to that. And
yeah,
then all of a sudden, it's about 8 weeks before you're supposed to go live or launch this new idea or this new change. And that's when they start all this change management work. And I'm like, if you don't think people have already been talking for the months or sometimes years beforehand with this change, you are grossly misguided. And this is way too
yeah,
late in the process. That's one of my big things when I talk about change readiness. I'm like, change management is managing the event. It's reducing
yeah,
the risk. It's managing the event. It's doing the training. It's checking, it's making sure you have your town halls and your newsletters and your communications and all of that. Change readiness is preparing the individuals for this change that you are going to eventually be embarking on as an individual or as an organization. And it really focuses more on your mindset. Do you have the necessary tools and techniques to uh, see things differently and to remain resilient among the stressors that change is inevitably going to present? How are you communicating with one another?
mhm,
Not even like the newsletter communication and what's happening within the organization, but how are you communicating and sharing ideas and speaking up and challenging one another? And how do you collaborate as a
mm,
team? Because often when it comes to change, especially big changes within an organization, you're creating these teams, these project teams for this change. And while they are all part of the same organization, most often they are not people who have had to work with one another.
yeah,
They're in their different departments. And each department has their group and their way and their lane, if you will, of what they do and how they do it. They are not used to doing this cross collaboration design or change across multiple areas within an organization. So it really helps they understand how they can learn to work together, work with one another,
yeah,
and have that healthy conflict and effective feedback, a little bit of compassionate candor, and
mhm.
like, yeah.
And I think also when I had that experience, but you bring this up too across departments, I was working with a cross-functional team across an entire university. Not a single person on my team reported directly to me. I did not have the ability to hire, fire, evaluate, coach, do any type of formal type of HR function with them.
Hmm.
And honestly, their performance was outside of their job on this committee. Many times we were talking about things that had nothing to do with their department, but we needed their input and them to provide that. And then there was always the awkward time where we were actually talking about their department and they like really had a lot of passion around that conversation, but there were 18 other people around that room. So they were the solo and that was a balancing act because
Hmm.
people didn't always have the same we didn't really have a level playing field, but I also didn't have the ability and maybe this was good to say, "If you don't deliver for this committee, your job performance review might be on the line, or this is a requirement of your job and you're not acting civilly. But the other thing too was the decision. So we were a collaborative group, but ultimately we were not the decision makers. We
Hmm.
had two people that we would give recommendations to and say, this is where we want to go. And obviously, they took a lot of weight into what we were saying, but we weren't the deciders.
Yeah. Yeah. That can absolutely happen in an organization where you, like I said, you are an influencer. You
Yep,
might not be the leader or the single decision maker, but having alignment or at least understanding how to gain that alignment. Even if the ultimate decision is not the one that you wanted,
yep.
ensuring that you're taking the time to be seen and heard and understood is really important. I think it's funny. We're not really taught how to people.
Oh,
You
yeah.
know,
There's no
yeah,
class on that.
there's no class on people. We go through school and secondary and advanced education, and we learn all these tools and techniques of how to do our job or how to perform XYZ role or task.
Mhm,
But the people piece is really the key driver of any change that is going to
mhm.
happen in your life or in your work. It's funny. There's a couple laws of organizational change, but it's true with any change. And that is change would be easy if it weren't for people.
Yeah.
Because yes, events can happen. Software can be
Mhm.
introduced, new policies can be put into place, but at the end of the day, it's 100% contingent on whether or not people will actually make it happen and drive it forward and make it stick.
Yeah. Yeah, the people piece is the hard piece.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
we've talked a lot about people who are maybe on the side of needing a little more time and a lot more details. And remind me what you
Hmm.
called them.
They are conservers
Conservers?
officially.
All
Hmm.
right. And then let's talk about the other side.
Yeah.
Somebody, originators, somebody who really is driving change, finding change, loving change. How might they be more aware of where everybody is at? What tips you have for them?
One of the biggest things for them is first and foremost having awareness. And this is true of any of these styles, understanding who the different style players are within your team, your organization, or whomever it is that you're going to be working with. For originators, the key for them, because they are always big picture thinkers, they are always thinking about the
Mm,
future and what's possible and what's next. One of the big things for them to help them uh, kind of, I'll say, move a little bit more towards the middle or meet in the middle or see others and where they're at is to remind them of how what is changing ties
mhm.
to what is today. So but they can tend to just throw the baby out with the bathwater, right? I know it's a terrible phrase,
Yeah,
but they can tend to do that. And they just are so focused on the future, but it really helps for them so that they can be more considerate and sympathetic and a little
mhm.
bit more compassionate to the other members of their team is to tie it back to what is. It's like, yes, we're not completely abandoning everything that
Yeah,
we do today. We're improving, we're optimizing. So let's not forget the things that are actually working well today that we want to continue to bring forward into the future, along with the new, shiny, cool stuff that we're going to be bringing in.
yeah. Yeah, and I think that's really key is really thinking about that before you jump into the change.
And another thing, when it comes to change in general, regardless of your style, I think this would really appeal to the conservers, but it's helpful for all individuals and players when it comes to change, is also do a little bit of planning for failure.
Mm.
And when I say that, I don't mean Sky is falling, Chicken Little, Carol,
Yeah,
right? Flash, Debbie Downers. Let's just see when this thing implodes.
yeah,
It's actually taking intentional time before you kick off the project to
yeah,
have a what can go wrong session. All right, we
yeah,
have this great goal. We created our cool mission statement, our one liner that we're going to use to remind people of where we're going. Where can this go awry?
yeah.
And actually allowing that opportunity. Now, granted, even to be able to have that conversation requires a little bit of coaching and training on the getting comfortable with
Yeah.
providing that level of feedback and speaking up. But doing that allows you to not lose sight of all of the things that could potentially come up during the change And this is true both personally as well. I do this as well. When I set a goal for myself or I set a change initiative or that I'm trying to achieve personally, I also think about all the things that could go wrong with it, because what it does is it allows you to be prepared.
Yeah.
So it's not saying this is going to happen or we're going to do things that are going to make this more probable to
Yeah.
happen. But when it does happen, I already know what to do. I already know what change, what pivot, what adjustment we need to make, as opposed to trying to make it in the moment, under stress when there's deadlines and budgets and everything. You actually take the time to do that planning. It's just what they do. Any sports team, the game is not when they show up to do the work. They do the
Yeah.
work in practice. The same thing with, if you think about NASA and when they were trying to land on the moon, they practiced for failure a lot. So that way,
Yeah.
when they were in those moments, they're literally in a rocket that is shooting up into space. They know what to do. They can remain calm and cool and adjust and continue to move forward.
Yeah, and I think back to that example I shared, there was a lot of concern about what if this electronic process doesn't work? And
Hmm.
so w Carol was a prime example. She was like, "Why don't we run a paper process that we've been doing for a long time and an electronic process side by side?" And that
Hmm.
was the comfort not only did she personally need, but when she went back to her team and they're like, "We can't believe you're on board with this." She was like, "Oh, we're still running our same process over here." And she got to be a little like let's make sure this actually works. And then when it worked and she realized it saved so much time, she was totally on board. I think the other thing that sometimes comes with change, and maybe you can address this, especially with automation and bringing stuff into maybe being a little more automated, some people have a fear that it'll eliminate a position or it'll
Hmm.
change somebody's job so much that they're no longer needed.
Yeah. I could say, oh, that never happens. But the truth is that it can happen and it often may happen in certain environments. But at least the way I like to approach
Yeah.
any operational readiness that I do with clients is to not look at roles in isolation, but really more focus on the actions that are
Yeah.
being taken within any given process.
Yeah.
Because yes, there are things that absolutely can be optimized through automation, through automation. It can
Yeah.
be optimized through automation, or AI is so hot right now. There's definitely opportunities for that. But if we take a step back and we fully look at what is it as a process operationally that we are trying to
Yeah.
achieve, often people will be the first ones to say, yeah, you know what? This isn't really adding value to what
Yeah.
my role is or what my role is meant to serve. But then also, I like to just look at people and their skill sets in general. I like to remove the role or the role constraint a little bit as much as possible, because there is benefits to that as an organization in general, both when you're going through change. If you just sit there and take the time to understand what skills a person has, more skill based or project based style
Yeah.
work, it actually allows for a lot more flexibility and adaptability as future shifts come in, whether by choice or by push.
Yeah.
You can actually adapt a lot more. I think right now, to all of the, unfortunately, the mass layoffs that have been happening, especially in the technology world. And to one hand, they're saying we overhired, we got a
Yeah.
little
Yeah.
excited. That's one thing. Yeah, you weren't doing good resource planning, number one. But more importantly, I think if you just look at people in a role in, this is what I do. I am in my world, I do staffing. So in my world, I'm a recruiter, I'm an account manager, I'm a payroll specialist, I'm a sourcer, whatever it is. If you look at them just in that box, it's a lot easier to say, oh, we don't need your role anymore. But if you look at them holistically as a person, as a human with
Yeah.
skills and capabilities, it actually creates a lot more opportunity. Maybe that person who's a
Yeah.
sourcer is really good with creating marketing materials and copy. All right, let's use them in a different way. Let's
Yeah.
have it be more task or skill based work as opposed to putting them in a role. So that way, in times of growth, but also when the dips happen, when there is times of slowdown, you don't have to do these mass layoffs or hiring. You're
Yeah.
just moving the pieces around and finding where they best fit. It actually really helps you with retention and engagement as well. If people are doing the things
Yeah.
that they feel they're great at and you're not just putting them in a box.
And I think if you also involve them in the process, sometimes you'll find things that weren't in their job that you didn't know they were good at, but they are. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It's leaning
Well,
into their superpowers, their special talent, and how you can leverage those while also leaning on the amazing capabilities that technology and automation can present, but they should be an enabler, not a replacer.
yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I always think back to I had this one job where I was like, I'm gonna watch people work when I first started, which that is the most fascinating thing. I actually wish I could make that my full-time job. But I watched this lady work and she had a spreadsheet over here and a spreadsheet over here, and she was copying and pasting data over. And I just was like, "Why are we doing this?" And she's, "I don't know. I just produce this report every month, and this is how they told me to do it. And the data's not in the same format, and this Excel spreadsheet is locked, and I'm not allowed to edit it." And I was like, "Who produced this spreadsheet?" She's, "Bob in reporting and data." "Have you ever talked to Bob?" She's, "No, I don't even know who Bob is. Like, he just
Mhm.
emails it every month." And I was like, "We're gonna go talk to Bob, and he's gonna realize that you spend hours doing this." And
Yeah.
after that, Bob's, "Oh, I could just put it in that format." And for her, it was like the biggest relief because every month she was like, "I dread this. It's so ridiculous." And that was like she'd been doing it for years.
Mhm. That brings up a great point. And when we think about change readiness, and this can be
Yeah.
true for you personally, again, you have a change goal that you're trying to pursue personally, or if there's a goal that an organization is trying to pursue, is there is extreme value in understanding your starting point, what
Yeah.
you do today. And I think so few people or organizations have taken the time to do that. And it's something that I really encourage, whether it's something I work with you on or you do on your own. You have to understand where you're at today to know how and where you want to take it tomorrow. I so often see organizations that just jump onto the change innovation wagon
Yeah.
without any understanding of how their business is run today, good or bad.
Yeah.
Right. And so that's where change can become too much, too
Yeah.
quick for too many people because often the people that are choosing the change are often more originator style people. And so they're trying to just focus 100% on the next
Yeah.
in the future and not taking the time to understand. Yeah, you have to understand like who you are as a person, what you do and what you don't do today to help you even be able to step into and make those small incremental changes that you want to make in your life personally or professionally.
Yeah.
There is this whole we could talk a whole other topic on your immunity to change and what that means and why it's there and what are the hidden barriers. But the truth is that if you just sit down and say, okay, here's a thing that I want to achieve, what am I doing and what am I not doing that are in direct conflict with this change that I want to have happen? Because that has a starting point, that puts a stake in the
Yeah.
ground, and you know where you need to go from there.
Oh, I love that.
Yeah,
Amy, I could talk to you all day about
I know.
change, and I feel like you have so many different topics and such a great experience with change. If somebody's listening to this show and it really resonated with them, how might they reach out to you and what might they expect?
Yeah. So if you're an individual and either you personally want to pursue some change in your life or your work, or you're someone who is either a leader or a future leader, and you want to be more of that leader and influencer of change within your organization, you can go to changeready.me and you can take a quick little assessment and see where you're at on the change readiness spectrum. Spot the areas where maybe you are really killing it, where you're excelling and you have those skills, and maybe some others where there's an opportunity that you can build up a little bit more of the skills that will help you be in a better place to lead and influence and step into change. Again, even if you're just leading yourself, because we're all leaders of at least one person
Yeah.
in our
So
life.
can you say that URL again?
Yes, changeready.me. M-E.
Perfect.
And
All
then
right.
if you're, yeah, I was gonna say, and then if you're part of a team, changereadyteams.com. And you can see how ready your team is when it comes to change and maybe where there's opportunities as a team you can optimize or maybe even suppress a little bit, depending upon where you're at.
Oh, I love it. Amy, again, I could talk to you all day. Thanks for being on the show. I
Yay.
really appreciated it. You are just a wealth of information.
Thank you, Sarah.
All right, bold goal crushers, it's time to crush your goals and everything that gets in the way because you do not need to work double time. So let's get to it.